The inspiration for this particular topic came to me in India recently when I heard the problems that were being caused by the lack of discipline in digital production. And I think it affects everybody. It affects the editors who are inundated with a mess. It affects the creativity of everybody, and it affects the finances of the producers. These are all things which interest us as filmmakers for the future. And it's important that we find an answer. And this session is to try to, with this distinguished panel, to find an answer to help solve this problem, which we know it does exist. I'm not going to introduce the panel, but I am going to introduce you to Ronnie Prince, who is in charge of this session. Ronnie is the editor of the British Cinematographer magazine, which, as you know, is now a worldwide reputation for excellence and standard of its everything to do with it. So, Ronnie, over to you. Thank you very much.
So welcome everybody to the Creativity Through Discipline, or Indiscipline we might call it, in digital filmmaking. Before we begin, I think it'd be very helpful for our panellists to know who we've got out there in the audience. So I know we've got some cinematographers in the front here, but who else are cinematographers here? Okay, we've got a number of producers. Do we have any producers? Ours? Yes, okay. Directors? Any directors? We have a few directors, okay. First ADs and first ACs, because this concerns you, okay. Editors, students, okay, terrific. I think I've probably covered all the bases there. So we know we've got a bit of a spread there out there. So yes, as Nigel was saying, today's subject addresses the problems caused by the lack of discipline in digital production and post. Now, interestingly, this year is possibly the first year on record that a digital movie might just win an Oscar for Best Picture. There has never been a digital picture before, but 6 out of the 8 nominated movies this year were all shot digitally, which sort of tells us about the way that the times are. Now, through the opinions and the top tips, I hope, from the professionals on the panel, we hope that we can show you how you can take control of the digital world and improve your creativity. There's a Q&A at the end and also a bit of a visual treat for you in store, so don't run off immediately to go and grab a cup of tea or coffee. So let me introduce my all-star panel. So Iain Smith, to my left. Thank you very much. Is one of the UK's most experienced producers, having made films all over the world. His various credits as producer, associate producer, and executive producer include The Killing Fields, Local Hero, Cold Mountain, The Fifth Element, and Children of Men. Iain is deeply involved in the film industry too. He's served on the boards of the UK Film Council, Scottish Screen, Creative Scotland, and the Children's Film and Television Foundation. He's been a governor of the National Film and Television School and a chair of the Edinburgh International Film Festival. He is currently the chair of the British Film Commission, the Film Industry Training Board, and the Film Skills Council. I don't quite know how you manage it, Iain, but it's amazing. He's a patron of the London Film School as well, and a board member of the Production Guild of Great Britain. In 2005, he was awarded a BAFTA for Outstanding Achievement in Film, and an OBE, quite deservedly, in 2008 in the New Year's Honours List. His most recent work, which we're going to be hearing about during today's discussion, has been on the TV series 24, Live Another Day, and Mad Max Fury Road, which is enjoying no fewer than 10 Oscar nominations. Yeah. Moving on to Harriet, to my far left. Hello, Harriet. So after leaving university with a degree in social anthropology and visual studies, Harriet Cox worked her way from camera rental house trainee to loader and then focus puller before becoming the camera operator on the award-winning features Distant Voices Still Lives and The Long Day Closes, which are both directed by Terence Davis. In 2000, she was appointed the head of the camera department at the London Film School, where she currently teaches and runs the cinematography curriculum for the postgraduate and PhD courses. As an educator, she delivers outreach programs for youngsters, professional craft programs, international workshops, and she has presented papers on digital cinematography at several European conferences. We're going to be very interested to hear of her recent experiences to do with Imago, particularly in Brussels. Ben Smithard. Ben. Hello, Ben. Is one of our most talented cinematographers. He's been a cinematographer for 18 years, during which time he has shot on film and also with the very latest digital cameras, including Red, Alexa, Sony f65s. He shot over 500 commercials, and he made a name for himself with a very handsomely staged TV drama, Cranford, for which he won a Primetime Emmy, and the comedy series The Trip. His movies, which include some of my favourites, are The Damned United, My Week with Marilyn, Belle, Alan Partridge Alpha Papa, and the second best Exotic Marigold Hotel. His latest job was the Viceroy's House, which he shot in India on 35mm. Ben has been a member of the BSC since 2011. Also introducing another cinematographer to our panel, Franz Pagot. Hello, Franz. Franz was born near Venice, obviously in Italy, and he was educated in the classics. After working in the camera department for many years, he moved to London in the 1980s, assisting famed Steadicam operator John Ward on productions such as Full Metal Jacket, Robin Hood, and Sleepy Hollow, and ultimately establishing himself as a respected cinematographer in features and commercials, and he also has considerable underwater experience too. With his chiaroscuro style, he has framed cinema icons including Peter O'Toole, Ray Winston, Jude Law, and Stephen Burkoff. He recently shot a film called The Contract with a combination of Red Epic, GoPro, and Blackmagic cameras. He's a member of BAFTA and the GBCT. He's won many awards and published several books, which I believe is one of your books for sale here on the GBCT stand. So check books at the ready, everybody. It's called Immersive 3D, The Secrets of Beautiful Stereo Cinematography. Last but not least, but in fact the progenitor of our discussion today, is Andrew Bird, editor here. Andrew, yes, that's great, thank you. We like lots of clapping, thank you. Andrew was born in Hillingdon. He grew up in Hertfordshire. He studied German at Southampton University, and then he went to Hamburg on an exchange scholarship in 1979, and he never came back. He lives there to this very day. He initially worked as a translator and interpreter, and then he became a full-time film editor in 1992. The movies that he's edited have won numerous awards, including the Golden Bear at Berlin, and also prizes at Cannes, Venice, and in Toronto. They include Head On and The Edge of Heaven by Fatih Akin. Other works include The Future by Miranda July, sorry, I was trying to put a German spin on that. She, a Chinese by Xiaolo Guo, okay, and The Countess by Julie Delpy, and also Remainder by Omer Fast. Andrew is a two-time winner of the German Editing Award and a Lola Award winner for Best Editing at the German Film Awards. He's currently working on Fatih Akin's latest film, which I think is called Chick. Okay, so that's the panel. Andrew, obviously, as we've been saying, that this panel was sort of inspired by you. I think Nigel was at a film festival with you in India, where part of your conversation was lamenting the lack of time and the deluge of assets that are coming into post-production, causing problems. Perhaps not for you, but for other people that you might know of, who are not only getting into difficulties but perhaps getting fired off jobs. Can you reprise that dialogue just to sort of get us gently into this, world of digital assets?
Do I have to press anything here, or do I? No, I just talk. Nigel and I met at a film festival in South India where we were both mentoring, and I held a little talk there about editing, and one of the issues that I brought up was the fact that in the digital age, the amount of footage that we as editors have to deal with in the editing room is a great deal more than it ever was when people were shooting on film. I think in the past, the usual amount of rushes that you would expect to come from a day's shoot would be somewhere between 20 and 35 minutes. That would be kind of what I'd have to deal with in the editing room. since people have been shooting digital, you're having to deal with upwards of 90 minutes a day. That's about like 3 to 4 times the amount that actually ends up with the editor, and that's actually had no effect on the amount of time that we're given to actually edit the movies. So we're dealing with like 3 or 4 times the amount of footage, but with the same time. I think producers are very unaware of the consequences of that, and very often I think young directors tend to, I think there's a tendency to shoot before they think, to be a little bit provocative. I very often have to deal with stuff. It's kind of like when you're editing a film, it's as if you're kind of asked to make a beautiful flower arrangement with the elements that you're given. And sometimes you walk into the editing room and you're faced with a jungle, and you have to kind of cut your way through the jungle to actually even find the flowers that you want to arrange. And that is, it's sometimes a very daunting task. And living and working in Germany as I do, the way that German movies are funded is, it means that producers, there's a lot of public funding, there's a lot of public money in films in Germany, and producers receive an installment on the first day of principal photography, and then they'll receive the next installment as soon as a rough cut is finished. So they've had the shoot in the meantime, they've probably had a lot of expenditure during the shoot, and are very keen to get the cash flowing again. So there's a lot of pressure on editors to actually get a first rough cut out there as soon as possible after the conclusion of shooting. And that puts also a lot of pressure on editors, especially if they're having to deal with excessive amounts of footage. And as Ronnie said, there's been a few of my colleagues, I think it's friends of mine in a post-production house in Hamburg, they've said to me that the latest trend last year was for editors who hadn't actually got the film into shape within the few weeks that they are given to present a rough cut, to be very quickly fired off the job. And there's been a lot of films that went through that production house last year where there have been up to 4 editors on a film. I don't think that's good for the films, and it's obviously not good for the editors. And at the end, all we want to do is I think we're all in the business of making the best possible product, and I think editors are, they need time to do that.
There was one other thing when we were talking previously, that you mentioned that that often decisions can be deferred until post. And actually, I think you have a good example of that on a Danish film. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, I think there is a tendency as well now, because everything is possible digitally. You can actually correct any mistakes that you made. People do, like I say, tend to shoot a little bit earlier than they possibly would have done in the past if they knew there was film running through the camera. And there's also, of course, the possibility of retouching every frame. I think cinematographers and people on set tend to forget how much that actually costs to do. And the example that I told Ronnie about was a film produced by a friend of mine in Germany, shot in Denmark, where the film was set at the end of the Second World War, and it's about kind of mined beaches and young German soldiers having to clear the beaches of the mines. And a lot of the work in post-production, in digital cleaning, was to actually digitally remove litter from the beach, which to me sounds absolutely crazy, because I just think they could have sent somebody out to pick up the litter before they started shooting, instead of which they started shooting and they thought, well, okay, well, we can fix it later. And I think that thing tends to happen a lot. I worked on a film last year called The Cut, which was a fairly large budget for Germany movie, and it was set in 1915. We had to remove digitally a lot of electricity masts in the desert, because these days they're everywhere. But in a lot of places, I had the feeling that had the cameraman actually kind of thought about that a little bit more before he shot, he could have maybe chosen an angle that didn't need fixing afterwards. But because it's easy to fix, you just think, okay, we'll fix it later.
Those are some great points, and I know that we're going to come back to those with each of the other panelists. So fixing it in post is one thing. I'm going to turn to Harriet, who actually, I think she would like to fix things before it ever gets to post at the very beginning with the people that she's teaching, as an educationalist at the London Film School. So, Harriet, I think one of your observations when we were talking is that there is, to put the words creative and discipline together in the same sentence, they probably haven't been since Cynthia Payne, but creative and discipline. You think that there's an inherent paradox in having those two words together? How do you bring discipline to creative? Because you don't particularly want to rein in young creatives, do you? So, can you give us your sort of philosophical understanding of that, and then also how that's applied to the students at the London Film School?
Well, it was lovely sitting here earlier listening to the creative panel earlier talking about creativity, and realise it's a great privilege to teach in an industry that is so creative and really enjoy that part of it. And I know students do too. And that sense of the freedom and the thinking and keeping it alive is so important for education, and it's absolutely vital in the industry. And then in parallel, we have that there's the maybe more restrictive. Students see discipline as being something that would impose a restriction, and yet for the industry it is to do with working practices, and it's vital that creativity and working practices go parallel. But there is the paradox in that how do you teach creativity and keep it alive, and crucially instruct people on how to maintain discipline on set. And we see this. We still teach film. I'm sure we'll come on to talk about a bit more detail about that. But the tradition of film schools is to teach on film, where the on-set practice is vital to, it's inherent, it's been there for many decades. And now we're teaching digital. We've got smaller equipment, we've got different workflows, we've got a lot of lovely flexibility, but as you point out, it can end up in some sort of chaos if we don't maintain some discipline from on-set monitoring to how much we shoot. So I think there is this paradox for students as to how they work together and how they marry those two together, and that's absolutely essential for education and I think for the industry.
Sure. I think there's another thing which obviously came through from the earlier session that was expressed by each of the cinematographers that were talking, and that's about collaboration. Can you just give us your thoughts about the need to talk to one another? It's good to talk.
It's great to talk. In fact, I think collaboration underestimates for students to understand what collaboration really means in the film industry, the working together. It's far more extensive than many other disciplines in terms of academic disciplines have. And to understand that working together is why it's so important there's an interaction between industry and education to maintain that understanding. Because it's not explicable to people. It's not obvious.
Yes. Yeah. So I think that's obviously something that Ben and Franz, our two cinematographers, will be highly aware of. But rather than particularly keep focusing on that, I want to ask Ben and Franz about what they feel about when they're asked to shoot a project digitally. Can you tell us? Do you have any bête noire? And you think, oh my God, my alarms! But I've got to shoot this digitally. What am I going to do? Or is it all plain sailing?
Does this work? Oh, mine never works. Sorry. I understand where Andrew's coming from. As soon as I started shooting digitally, I didn't change the way that I shot from shooting film, and I tried not to. And I think if you are disciplined, it can be that way. I mean, there's so many connotations or issues with this. One is, I try to shoot one camera as much as I can because I can be just as quick with one than I can with two, so that becomes an issue. But it really depends on the kind of movie you're shooting. I don't shoot that many action pictures, so I don't need to have 3, 4, 5, 6 cameras. So that's going to make Andrew's life a nightmare, or any editor's nightmare. But then obviously you buy into that when you make that kind of project. But I taught myself to shoot very, very quickly with one camera. So it negates having a second camera there, obviously just rolling through the footage, unless it's Steadicam, of course, which I can't do. I think it's important. I mean, I tend to work on projects with very good actors, so they kind of, it's their desire to have a certain disciplined environment, so which I totally buy into, because it's about the performance and their relationship with the director to get their performance across. So I've never had, I must admit, I've not had this until this debate came up. I've not had an issue with an editor saying we've overshot and she or he is swamped with footage. I'm sure they do get swamped every now and again when you have bigger scenes, but I've not had that. Part of it's because I want to shoot the same way as I shot with film, because film worked perfectly for me as a medium. And the last movie I shot was on 35mm. That worked great. You see, that's weird because every director's different. I mean, I did a movie on digital with a director, and at the very end of the movie, I wish I'd shot on film, because she never did more than 3 or 4 takes. So financially, it would have worked for me to shoot on film, and it was a period movie, and I think it might have looked better if it had been shot on film, for sure. I'm not unaware of the issues. I've heard of editors being so swamped with footage that they can't even watch. They don't have time to watch the footage. So I don't want to be cavalier about shooting because the editorial is happening away from me. Because you could, as a cinematographer, you can quite easily go in conjunction with the director, we're just going to shoot and shoot and shoot and shoot. Who cares? I don't want to be like that, because if it becomes a problem where the editor can't watch your rushes because there's not enough time in the schedule, then I think we've got a problem. It may well be the B camera stuff. I don't know, but I think that's an issue. And I don't want to be cavalier about it. I want to make sure the editor's happy with everything. And I don't want to. The assistant editor could be in bits, because they're so overworked. I understand that. It's easy for me to go, on our aspect when we're shooting, we're getting up at 5 o'clock in the morning. You're going to a new place, and it's difficult. And look at our problems. That's not very collaborative if you do that, I don't think. So I understand where they're coming from, but ultimately, from my perspective, with a discussion like this, you probably need to bring directors into it, because I can't say to a director, we're shooting too much. I just can't do it. And the last thing I say is, on the last movie I shot, I suppose the best example of this, the answer to this, is something that nobody wants to hear, is let's just shoot on film, because it's naturally more disciplined. And it's difficult to overshoot. Well, it's not difficult, but it is from my perspective, because I'm part of the bond, the insurance bond. If I overshoot the film, on film, I don't know, 5,000 feet a day, I'm going to get questions from the producers. So that's one way of dealing with it, but I don't think anybody wants to hear that, because everyone wants to shoot digitally these days. But the last movie I shot, we were given 7,000 feet approximately per day over a 9-week schedule. And we stuck to it. And but I didn't at any stage talk to the director about that, because it's not. They don't have to deal with that, and they shouldn't have to deal with that. So 7,000 feet is just over an hour, okay? So, and then by the time the end of the movie, so we're getting bigger scenes, and we've got 1,000 extras here and 400 extras there, and a couple of cameras rolling, and so we were up to 10,000 feet. So really, the only person with a real worry apart from the editor was me, because the producers, they didn't say anything. They were very cool about it, but it gets to a point where the producer's got to go, you know what, you're overshooting. So, but they didn't. They were very cool, and we overshot a little bit. But in the grander scheme of things, it was, shooting another 40,000 feet was nothing. But it ended up going to about 2 hours, probably a day. But you know what? I don't think that's unmanageable, really, when you think the edit schedule for that movie, which is still going on at this moment, is about 6 months. But I'm aware of it, but I don't know how to resolve it without bringing the director into it, which I'm not really prepared to do on most occasions, to go up to the director and go, we can't shoot too much. I don't think it's the right thing to say to a director who's got millions of other problems on their shoulders.
Yes, I think that's probably a question that we'll in a few minutes we'll probably ask Iain Smith, our producer, whether he has a role in all of that. But Franz, we're just eager to get your thoughts as well about when you're presented with a digital shoot. What are the considerations for you?
the bête noire, I don't think is technology per se. Is the hype that comes with it. Not because obviously Harry is here, but if you remember, till the Alexa came in, that truly is, as close as film as you can. There was so many cameras being dished out like the latest thing, and it was all about megapixel, bit rates, and debugging, all these wonderful words. And the cameras were not ready. I'm not going to make any names, but everybody knows what I'm talking about. They were not ready. They had lots of problems, and all companies, a famous company, well-known manufacturer, dished out a camera saying, "You're not going to need any more lights. This will do." Just imagine saying, that to cinematographers. Yeah, that went down very well. Is the hype? I think what causes a problem is that you get approached for a job. I happily shoot film or digitally. I come from film. And a lot of people say, yeah, but we can't afford this, so we shoot with this camera. And they don't even worry about, what that camera. The camera is a recording device, and is horses for courses. I've seen fantastic films that were shot literally on a cheap, VHS recorder. Fantastic. The medium is not the message, but the problem is the hype is killing the message. So I'm happy to shoot with an iPhone, and I have. Trust me, I have. If it's the right, course of action, the right tool for the message. But of course, as a cinematographer, I want to work on the biggest possible canvas I can. 70 mil if I can, 65 mil. By all means. You mentioned contract. In the contract, what we had is, the director, Nick Auerbach, artistically wanted, at one point a scene when, there was a sort of hallucination from the main actress after this accident. And I had a handheld rig, and I had an Epic, a GoPro, F57, an iPhone, and a 5D. Because then the editor was going to mix all this into, it worked. We did some tests, obviously, with shooting with one camera and try different things, and then we shoot tests with all the cameras, and the director preferred, that. And I said, yes, he was right. I think creativity is a weird thing. I had to look it up on Wikipedia last night, to be honest, because I thought, yeah, I'm talking about creativity, but it's not something that you consciously think what it means. And creativity apparently means, creating something new that has value to it. Now, obviously, value for us cinematographers is, amazing images, and you have plenty of talent here has created some amazing images with nothing sometimes. For a producer, is obviously value that film will sell. For an editor, it's obviously having enough time to look at the material. I feel sorry for editors, but I also feel sorry for camera assistants. When I was a camera assistant, I'm sure Ben will agree, we had 5-6 cameras that we had to learn about it, and to be honest, they all worked pretty much in the same way. The threading mechanism was different. Now, you talk to camera assistants, they have to know the menus and settings and all sorts of things of at least, 50 cameras. I'm not exaggerating. I feel sorry for them, and some menus are just designed just to, make even them sort of rocket scientists going crazy.
It's hard enough sometimes to, run a washing machine, isn't it? Never mind a camera.
It is.
Okay.
It is.
Yeah. So thank you, Ben and Franz. So Iain, having heard, all of that, there's a lot. We've covered a lot of ground already. And I thought would be of great interest because you've worked on Mad Max, a feature film, which has got some mind-boggling statistics to it in terms of footage created and cameras used, and then the TV series 24, which is probably also equally mind-boggling in its ruthless efficiency. So could you can you just take us through perhaps some of the statistics, and cause I've got them written down here, but I may have them wrong, but to do with Mad Max, and then compare the different styles of production of the two shows.
I think you put your finger on it when you talked about value. From a producing point of view, I tend not to look so much at cost and prefer to look at value, if you could see the difference. Because there are times when you want to spend money in order to protect or get a value. And there's no better example, I think, than Fury Road, which the genesis of Fury Road was 25 years ago in George's mind. And he before I got involved, he tried to get it off the ground twice before in the celluloid analog paradigm. And not for that reason, but for other reasons that hadn't worked. So I got invited in to try and apply, I suppose, organizational discipline to face the realities of what George wanted to do. We had no screenplay on the movie. There was no 120-page screenplay. It was purely over 4,000 storyboards that George had lived with for decades. And his whole approach was to respect the audience by giving the audience a direct experience with the action. And so he wanted to do everything stunt-wise. He wanted to do for real. He didn't want to rely unduly on CGI. And this was the challenge right from the get-go. So immediately for someone like me, and I'm looking at that cost-value divide, the battleground between art and money, I'm immediately faced with a guy who's blocking off all the possible solutions that I might have. But we took that on board, and we proceeded to make a movie, which I hope you've seen, which could not have been made in any other way other than digital. And the reason for that is at the heart of it that we had 140 eccentric vehicles driving at high speed across very harsh desert conditions, and celluloid just wouldn't have done it. It wouldn't have done it in terms of the amount of material that we needed to capture. It wouldn't have done it in terms of the conditions that we were in. If we'd had to open up and reload the sand in maybe a silica base, so it's diamond sharp. And so everything had to be contained and protected. And what the thing about digital was that I knew that George had the filmmaking discipline, which actually goes right back to the very basis of filmmaking itself, which is anyone who wants to make a film that's worth anything starts from a disciplined basis. And so George knew the story. I mean, as a producer, I'm always looking to see, does the filmmaker know the story that he or she wants to tell? Which sounds kind of obvious, but you'd be amazed at how many people go into making a movie thinking that they walk on the set and start making a movie. George's approach, to simplify it in a short time, George's approach was to be organized right up to the hilt, and then to maintain a margin of flexibility which would allow for stuff to happen in the moment. He kept his actors very much in the dark. He didn't share with them much in the way of his ideas. He wanted them just simply to be. And so the whole business of running on and using digital cameras to keep moving, keep going, keep moving onto this, onto that. We couldn't have done that with celluloid. We would have constantly been having a break in energy and a rebuilding of energy. So when you look at Mad Max, what you're looking at is a piece of filmmaking integrity. And I mean by integrity, it's coherent. It's very, very carefully planned. Any one of you who knows about film storytelling, you will see there's such a sure-footed film. It's not just action. There's a lot of stuff going on underneath. So we had a situation where we had 6 Alexas. We had a whole bunch of Canon 5s, and what I think ended up being hundreds of GoPros. And one day we ran 30 cameras simultaneously. I was looking at dailies in the evening on my iPad, where sometimes I would have to run through 20 minutes on the screen, knowing that the bit that we're trying to get is 15 seconds in the middle somewhere. So all of that was a fantastic way to make films. But the discipline, the point I'm trying to make is the discipline of the filmmaker that is traditional and has always been the case. There's not a good film that hasn't been made without creative and organizational discipline, was 10 times more required in a movie like Mad Max. 24 was the complete antithesis. In Mad Max, we shot for 23 weeks. When George got back to Sydney and sat down with Margie, his editor, he had 480 hours of rushes to look through. That took 4 months just simply to wrangle that into a shape where it could actually be assessed in terms of starting to cut it together. Post-production George is not the fastest editor in the world. Post-production took 3.5 years. So that is a problem if you're not prepared for it. But we were prepared for it. We knew that that was what was going to happen. And so it didn't take us by surprise. We didn't try to I mean, the studio, Warners, were obviously very concerned. But George wasn't being indulgent. He was being careful as a filmmaker. And I think the results are on the screen. It's a victory of filmmaking over Hollywood expediency. So I think there are many, many pluses. I mean, as a producer, in one sense, I'm agnostic about film, celluloid, or digital. But I have to say there are many, many pluses to digital. I think from John Seale's point of view, he saw it very much as a two-parter. There was what he did in the front end and then what he did in the back end. And the control that gave him, and particularly the relationship with visual effects, I think he really appreciated it. I think he enjoyed it as a DOP. It gave him an added purchase on the total delivery of the movie. I don't know if that answers any of your
well, I think that's a wonderful insight into Mad Max. But I think the other side of it is just to give us your experience on 24, because that's a different thing, isn't it?
Totally, it's the opposite, as I was going to say, and it's. I wanted to do this because everyone has said to me, "Oh, you just make big pictures, and you're not able to look after anything small." You know, and I was offended by that, because I think there's a professional approach to if you've got to do this, you do this. If you've got to do that, you do that. Fox wanted to make a movie, actually, a spin-off of 24, so I got involved with that. And then when the high-end TV tax relief came in Britain, they said, why don't we make a TV series? And I kind of thought about it and said, okay, let's do it. So what we were doing with 24 was we were making the equivalent of a feature every 16 days. High action, fast moving. There was no time for, I mean, American TV is notorious for this. And everyone kind of shrinks from it and says it's horrible, but actually it turned out to be very creative in that we didn't, 2 or 3 takes, move on. Multi-cameras, no rehearsing. The actors had to know their lines going in. There was no video village. We had obviously monitor playback, but it came back down to the good old thumbs up from the operator. That's yep, we got it, move on. And so there was a fantastic production achievement going on. And I think that I thought it would be much more brutal than it was. In fact, because everybody was on message that this was what the technology was enabling us to do, it became very creative. It became almost like giving a live performance. That sense was increased by the fact that we had to go to air 6 weeks after we finished shooting each episode. So it was absolutely writing as we went along, shooting, over to LA for the editing, into the TV screens within 6 weeks. So that was a scary, exciting, creative process. But it's the complete opposite of Mad Max, which was lumbering through its post-production while we were doing this.
Aren't movies are becoming a similar kind of thing, where there's a deadline set? Take James Bond, for instance. They know when they're going to have the premiere and have the royal premiere, and then it goes out to the cinemas worldwide. And at the risk of using a football term, it's squeaky bum time for the visual effects people, because I think that the visual effects are still being done, or I learned that the visual effects are still being done on that movie a week before it was shown to Wills and Kate in London.
I mean, but that would have been the case had it been 12 months, or everyone takes everything right to the line, and George is no different. He was taking every possible opportunity. Yeah. So, I mean, I think digital gets a lot of flack, I think, from people thinking that because you can shoot it any which way you like, you don't have to make any choices. I think if someone's backed you and invested in you, and that's the way you want to tell a story, you've got a problem, whether it's digital or celluloid, frankly. Yeah.
So that's been a truly fascinating insight. I think you'll all agree. Now, I'd just like to go back to our cinematographers, a bit of a quick fire round here, and ask them. I think that Franz, you gave us a bit of an overview about how important it is for you to know the digital cameras. But Ben, you've obviously shot with quite a range of cameras. How important is it for you as a cinematographer to know your digital film stock, I guess.
Well, I think it's important that you know everything as much as you possibly can, because you just don't want things to trip you up, and you don't want to the speed that you can work. Sorry to go back to film, but obviously the great thing about film was it was so, in a sense, the process was so simple. Creating great images is obviously not so simple, but with digital, you just need to know as much as you possibly can, whether you come to shows like this or sit and read, sit on the internet or whatever. You just need to understand that. So it's all about maximizing the time when you're shooting, because it's so expensive. There was a question earlier on about VFX with like some poles in the background and stuff. I learned about VFX, so I knew when I'm shooting, I know what I can get away with by doing it in post, rather than, obviously I'm working these figures out in my head, but rather than having 60 people wait around while I change a camera position, I know, well, okay, this can be done in the grade or the online, actually, not even in VFX, and it's done, and it's quick, and it's much cheaper than spending 20 minutes waiting around for the art department to do something about it or whatever. So as far as understanding the equipment, it's vitally important.
And then another question, which it's come to my notice. I've been made aware that First AC's focus pullers, they're either walking away from jobs or perhaps a bit like the editors, getting fired because of a trend to shoot wide open, because of the digital sensor and because you don't need lights at all anymore to shoot anything. You can shoot with, I'd say, 500,000 ISO Sony camera or something. It's crazy. Anyway,
it doesn't look very good when you blow it up on a cinema screen.
Sure.
Let's face it.
Sure. Anyway, but what are your thoughts about this trend to perhaps putting not just the image, the crew, but also the image in jeopardy by shooting wide open?
I'd say one thing very quickly. When you watch great movies, okay, and I mean, there's some cinematographers sitting right in front of me here who have shot some of the most amazing British films ever. I wasn't aware of their T-stop when they shot these movies, whether it be 5.6 or wide open or whatever. I wasn't aware of that. I was aware of these people shooting amazing films, and that's what we're here for, is to shoot great films with great acting, great scripts, great directors, great producers, great editors. I don't like to see out-of-focus rushes, because I end up getting post-mortems with producers, and it's just not worth my time to do that. So I personally don't do it unless I'm desperate and it's dark and I haven't got time, and then I will do it. But in a general rule, I'm more interested in what's going on in front of the camera than shooting at a ridiculously wide-open T-stop that just gives the focus puller a nightmare, the editor a nightmare, and ultimately, why are we shooting these actors if some 20% of the time they're going to be out of focus? It doesn't mean anything to me in that sense. I'm not obsessed by it. If you get the camera at the right distance from an actor on the right lens, you can shoot them at 2.8 or whatever and still get a great image.
I think the best way to understand, especially for students, different digital cameras, is to think of them like film stock. I think of a particular camera like a type of film stock that I used to choose for a particular job, and that is oversimplifying it, but that's the best way to approach it. In terms of, do we have to know everything as much as we can? Yes, I've always been very excited about everything technical, and sometimes some disastrous consequences. Never take apart cameras, please, because you're never going to be able to put them back. But I got to a point in my career when I really have to let go. I don't want to be a geek. I think there is enough people with enough technical experience on set. And yes, I know about LUTs in different ways, and you name it, and how the wiring works, and can bore you to death. But I'm not interested anymore. I really rather take a walk, to the National Portrait Gallery and have a look at, that kind of stuff, than reading, one of the menus and instruction manuals. There's one quick point I'll make about the wire removal, because I think you hit a raw nerve with cinematographers there. It's true. Sometimes it's a lazy approach. Sometimes we can't move, 60 people around in a camera that was being carefully positioned. Sometimes we can't because the lighting is perfect and has to match what we shot before and after or another day. So I'm always careful when people criticize somebody else's work or tell me stories about the kind of footage they received because I wasn't there. So I don't know if I'm surprised when I hear certain stories about certain cinematographers not doing that or effing that and this and that, because you don't know, you were not there, and I feel the pain sometimes. It's not as easy as people think to create amazing images. It's not really just taking a light meter out and just pointing and be all creative and all that kind of stuff. No, it's bloody hard work. And I think most cinematographers have enough experience, especially obviously, the one that can be called professionals, to know when you can get away in post or not. It is true, on the other hand, that quite often, yes, we're fixing post, let's move on. Well, no, you can't. It'll cost you twice as much. It's actually cheaper to move the camera now. So I think any good cinematographer will do that and try to save money in post. I think cinematographers are between a rock and a hard place. Obviously, we have to try and achieve what the director wants to do, and at the same time, we are very aware of, time restriction and cost restriction. And but I think we are all on the same boat. We want to create, the most beautiful image that obviously is the one that serves the story better.
Okay, thank you. And the last question to both of you, perhaps if the other panelists have a thought about this next one, which I think is a corker, which is on-set monitoring and being able to look at things on, rushes on iPhones. That's got to be a good thing for everyone, hasn't it?
What, watching rushes on an iPhone?
Yeah.
Really?
And on-set monitoring. Surely that's got to be a good thing for everybody.
I
think
guess
I'm being
so.
sarcastic.
I guess so. It depends on the director, really. The last director I worked with had only shot on film, so she was happy to watch a crap monitor that was, I think it was black and white, actually. I don't know. A lot of directors don't watch rushes anymore, digital rushes, because there's too many. They'll wait a week and then watch the assemblies. So that's one thing. I think there was a bit of it was a bit crazy at the beginning when digital came out, but everybody got used to it and everybody's cool with it. Most of the people, are cool with it now. I mean, I remember on my very first digital movie, I shot a long, long time ago. Somebody came up behind me and said, looked at something on the monitor and went, are you sure that's right? And I turned around and it was a caterer. So that threw me a little bit, and I thought, if this is the way this is going to go, this is going to be difficult. But I think the monitoring's fine. Rushes are on iPads and stuff like that. That's not good, really, because. But I haven't been offered that many different things. I mean, I shot a movie about 4 or 5 years ago, and that was the last time I watched projected rushes. The difficult thing is that there's a lot of things that the editor can't see really on their monitors, and then so the first time that you ever really see the image is when you grade it in the DI suite, usually 4 months after you finish. So then you've got some more problems, but I don't really know how to resolve those. But if we have to get back to what this panel was about. It was about addressing the issues with discipline and trust me, I address them every single day because it's much better to have an efficient crew. Everybody's working in the same direction, and most of the time it is. I've only heard horror stories.
Well, we're gonna come to that. I'm just wondering if Franz or Iain, what you think about, because you were mentioning having to scroll through 25 minutes worth of rushes just to find,
Well,
is it helpful to you?
Yeah, in a way, in as much. I mean, we kept it very restricted. I mean, there was only certain people could see the material, and it was more to make sure that we'd gotten everything, and just to keep all eyes who cared on looking at what George was achieving each day. But basically, the energy was out in front, and there was none of that sort of sitting back in a hotel watching stuff. That's gone.
Yeah.
That doesn't happen. But we were in very much live contact with Margie, the editor in Sydney. So this stuff was down the pipeline, and she was looking at it, and George was talking to her as she was watching it. And he relied much more on that relationship than anyone else. And certainly we didn't encourage the idea of anyone having an opinion over the shoulder. You know, that's just nightmarish. Whether they're crew or visitors. I mean, I've had visitors come on set and start talking about the setup. I've had to ask them to leave. But the fact of the matter is most professional crew realise that there are lines in the sand that you don't cross. And the key thing, I think, is about energy. Films are made, stories are told through energy. And if anything that interrupts that, I mean, I'm talking about even like the 10-hour day. I much prefer to work a 10-hour day where you burn through, you don't have a stop for lunch, you just keep on going. But the deal there is you have to stop when the 10 hours is done. And I think if you've got that kind of disciplined approach to what you're doing, you actually achieve a much greater result on the screen. And digital is very much a plus in that sense, that it gives you the ability to keep the concentration of everybody on the job that you're achieving.
Speaking of which, it neatly segues into my next bit. We're rapidly, I don't know how we're doing for time. Are we doing okay for time? Has anyone fallen asleep out there yet? Hello? Are you all there? Very good, thank you. Roger Deakins, I had the privilege of speaking to Roger Deakins the other day, and I asked him about the issue of discipline. And he just shot, he's been shooting Hail Caesar for the Coen brothers on film, which is probably a novelty for him because he hasn't shot film for probably 5 or 6 years. And I asked him about the discipline of filmmaking, and Ben has alluded to it many times. And he said the beautiful thing about film is that it focuses everybody's attention, and concentration to a moment when the camera rolls. It's the crew, it's the actors, it's probably even the catering staff as well. But it's not so with digital, he said. The shooting ratios can go through the roof, because people have thought it's a good idea to capture the rehearsals as well as the takes. And then he said, when that starts happening, everything just starts to fall apart. So, Harriet, I hope you don't think that we've forgotten you. So, to bring it back to, film and the discipline of filmmaking. Now, I believe that you were at an Imago event in Brussels not so long ago, where didn't Imago were basically saying that they think film is a very good thing for people to learn about in film school. Can you give us your insight into that?
Well, it was a number of film schools from across Europe, and everybody agreed that for teaching purposes, the film discipline, the on-set etiquette, the working photochemically is very important. It's been a very important tradition in film schools, and many film schools have been really struggling with this idea, the idea and replacement of digital. So everyone agreed film was the best for teaching, but how do we proceed in a digital environment? And many film schools can't afford film. In fact, I was at another film school and said, well, how if I'm only got digital, how can I maintain that filmic discipline on my set? And going back to the monitoring, it was interesting that for many years when we taught 35mm, and we still do, but at the time we didn't have a video tap for our camera. And the students desperately wanted monitoring. And so when I got the Alexas, of course, I got monitors. And on the first day of the shoot, they wheeled the monitor back into the equipment room and said, we don't want a monitor. We don't want to teach by committee. We don't want to film by committee. So anyway, they gradually got used to monitoring, but it is something that, we hear from everybody else, how you have to get used to it. But what I really like about moving into digital is the way that we can have in-house processing, that we have control over our footage. And it's no disrespect intended to the labs, but the film does go away, and students don't quite understand what happens to it, and it comes back. But with we still control the amount of footage. So like film, we can say you can have so many rolls. In digital, we can have so many, you can have this card. But the important bit is we can actually see rushes, and I just think learning from seeing your rushes is so vital, and not necessarily on an iPad as we've been hearing, but actually seeing it creating an environment where you can learn to critique your rushes and discuss them and work out how best to go forward. So lots of interesting disciplines from film which are transferable to digital, but also digital brings its own benefits, which we need to make use of and learn to work with.
Which I think you mentioning viewing the rushes, and it's something that Andrew mentioned to me in the run-up to today's panel, which was in the old days the editorial assistant would have a far more literal hands-on role with the film, rather than today they are there to load the data, the digits into the computer, and then they're perhaps not learning the art or the craft of editorial. Can you give us your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think that's changed a lot. It's, when I learned to edit, it was more like an apprenticeship. I was actually in the editing room as an editing assistant and had to be there because I was dealing with little snippets of film that I had to kind of roll up and have at my disposal whenever the editor actually needed them. But in being there and being involved in working in the editing room every day, I was there for every minute of the day while the editor was working with the director. So I was actually party to every decision that was made. And I think that's kind of really what I learned through the most, is actually kind of listening to why choices were being made the way they were being made. And every day there are hundreds, thousands of choices made in an editing room. Many of them may be poor choices, but they are made. Many of them may be revised in another day, but they're being made. And it was really helpful to me for my education as an editor to be there for that. Today, my assistant, I have a wonderful assistant. She's absolutely brilliant. She knows everything about the technical side of all the processes that I don't know about. But she is unfortunately, she is never in the editing room when I edit. Her work is done before my work starts. She preps everything for me, she syncs everything up, and then she goes home and looks after her children. And it's a great pity. And I think it's something that maybe educationalists really need to think about a little bit more as to how to involve young editors in the actual process of making a film, rather than, I think today you learn by being at film school, but it's not really the same.
Well, it's interesting, the film schools used to be you teach general filmmaking and then they went a little bit more specialist, and I think the trend today is to almost go back to what, my film school's 60 years old and has always taught that you teach filmmaking and you teach all roles to every student so that you can go into an editing room and you can understand the implications of that. So I think it helps on, hopefully.
As far as I know, there's a system in place in Denmark where I think they involve, they will get young editors to maybe edit a film, but they will have their work monitored or mentored by a more experienced editor. And I think that's that's possibly the way to go, but how to actually implement that, I really don't know.
Do we have any other thoughts from the panel about film?
I always think of the editor as the last storyteller and the last writer in a film, because in many ways an editor should have been detached from the technology. The technology is part of the process, but the editor has to be able to look at the beats and the scenes and basically protect that original spark of an idea that started the whole process. So I think we're in the business of storytelling in whatever form, and digital is just at the forward march of that. I mean, the good news is that the demand for filmed entertainment and for stories on film is growing around the world, and we have more opportunity now, I think, to have our ideas and our thoughts and our stories told to a much wider audience. Of course, things get lost. I mean, I'm old enough to see the curvature of history and to see how the movies used to be the one thing that was most important when you were making a movie. It was that you're going to make a good movie. Nowadays, there are so many other factors. There are brands and merchandising and games and all of those things. So is that something we should grieve over? Yeah, probably over a nice single malt whiskey. But at the end of the day, we all keep going and we make the most of what happens. And the disruption of technology is ultimately good for all of us because it resets us and makes us think again about something that we took for granted.
Yeah, I think filmmaking is no doubt a collaborative activity, industry, whatever you want to call it. I think Video Village nowadays is not a village anymore; has become a bit of a metropolis, and slightly ridiculous. So I think probably let's go back to discipline is to not having everybody and their dog allowed in the Video Village tent. It happens very much like when we shoot with a shot maker with a car trailer, and suddenly everybody wants to be on it. And why? For a ride? Do you ever go in a car? And I think that's very much it. I mean, for instance, I ask for a separate Video Village for the director and the first AD, and obviously continuity, and another Video Village for everybody else. I think it's unfair to say, no, you guys can't watch it. I think costume want to see it, and everybody else in the set design want to see it. They want to see what I'm framing, and obviously they can't come and ask me or breathe over the shoulders of the director. So I think that's a good discipline to have. And coming strictly to, data wrangler, I mean, I feel sorry for these guys. I mean, they're sort of, how shall you call them, more as bits and data shepherd, really, but they got no dogs, and it just goes all over the place. And again, I insist to have everybody just say DAT. Sometimes the DAT has to do too much, and people forget what a DAT is. So if it's a sort of reasonably big feature, I ask for DAT and at least a couple of data wranglers, and I still ask for a second AC. Because one thing that you have, and I'll say to especially students, even if it's a small project, make sure that you have enough people. Because digital, one of the hypes, and that's what we should fight more, is like, oh, you don't need this, we don't need a loader. Well, yes, you do. It's not called a loader anymore, but it's more stuff to do. In some cameras, we have 3 monitors nowadays, and so many accessories. And my focus puller, my first IC, has to worry about the lens, has to worry about that. And that's another thing, and then I'll shut up. It's when I have the occasional talk, people ask me, what was the menu setting? I never show anybody else film. I only show my work, because I only talk about my work. So I don't show The Third Man and American Beauty and that kind of stuff. I just show the little project I do. And quite often the question is, about what you shoot that on? Epic or whatever. So what menu setting was that for that scene? They don't ask me about the position of the lighting. They didn't ask me about the lens. And what I insist with everybody is about the lens. And as cinematographers, that's basically what we care the most. Watching, just to answer the last thing, is watching rushes. I think if you ask most cinematographers, that's the most beautiful moment for a cinematographer, is sitting in the grading suite. So yes, I always insist in watching it projected as big as I can. Not for other reasons, just because for me it's the greatest show on earth to see what I've done.
Is this working? Hello? Right, I can't hear myself. Okay, thank you very much indeed, Franz. Ben, do you have any further thoughts on just the filmic discipline moving into, you're bringing your filmic discipline into the digital realm?
Not really, because I think that with my experience, every job's different. On a commercial, you're going to have an agency and a client, so that's, they have a completely different opinion on how that commercial should take place, and then a movie's going to be a different thing, and a television series is going to be. I mean, I don't really mind what I shoot on, as long as I think it fits in with the way the film. It's what the film desires, what it needs. So I don't really mind so much. I'll always try and get the right lenses, the right cameras, but the discipline thing is, a lot of it comes down from the top, from the director, and I've worked with some pretty good directors who are. They naturally discipline themselves up to a point, but we're all there to help him along, and I just haven't got into this habit of overshooting yet. I have not been given the opportunity, so producers not come up to me and allowed me to do that. Although obviously, if Iain had asked me to do Mad Max, I might have said yes pretty quickly.
Harriet, do you have any further thoughts about the filmic discipline, taking that into the digital realm?
I think I've noticed one thing over the change over the last 10 years, which is the role of the DP on the set, and how we found that in teaching is that we're having to increase the, in a sense, working with the first AD is becoming really, really important in the teaching environment. it obviously happens naturally while you're in the industry, but it doesn't always happen in education. And I've really noticed how we need to work more closely with the first ADs to organise the set and be organised in order for the DPs to be allowed to do their work.
That's a very good point. That's massive. That is. The relationship with the DP and the first AD is huge.
At the end of the day, as a DP, you're only as fast as the slowest in your department. And having a good first AD, he's the one who's going to give discipline on set. The problem is nowadays in some projects, people don't really understand what a first AD does or is, and they just think it's just the director's personal assistant or somebody who shouts on set. I think the best first ADs I work with, and some really great ones, Terry Bamba, just name one, they actually shout with just to actually entertain the crew and get the energy going more than telling somebody off. So yeah, first AD is fundamental.
Okay.
Yeah, I would absolutely support that. On Fury Road, we had probably the best first assistant I've ever worked with, PJ Voten. He had that movie down soup to nuts, every detail. He knew every single camera angle that had ever been conceived of. It was an absolutely superhuman effort that he put in, and all credit to him. I mean, it's an amazing task. So I think digital and first assistants are automatically joined.
I think I've got one more question before we move to the Q&A, which is a question which may have different answers from our different panelists here. But do you think editors need to be on set more, Andrew?
No. I like to visit set because we editors, I mean, I don't want to come across as somebody who's always moaning, because I'm not a moaning type at all, really. But we editors do tend to get forgotten at the end of the process. We're kind of some way down a dark corridor and stuck in a little dark hole with the windows closed, and we never see the light of day. And producers tend to forget us when the whole crew gets a T-shirt for the shoot. None ever end up in the editing room.
Yeah,
it's true. It's true.
Like that for me.
We never get invited to wrap part. You know, we suffer.
It's the same for me, Andrew, because I edit a magazine. You know, it's exactly the same. No one remembers me.
Yeah, so I do like to go to set just to say hi. I do exist. I'm part of this production. Pay a little visit, but I generally don't like to be on set. And the reason for that is I don't like to see the space. I don't like to know what the real space was that was being shot. I don't like to know if the bathroom was to the left of the living room in an interior. I want that space to be told on screen, and for that, I might want to tell it as if the bathroom were to the right, and it would hinder me doing that if I knew what the real space was. So I like to work with the images that come out of the shoot, and not to sit around on set and have fun like everyone else does.
Harriet, do you think we should have editors on set?
We work in a situation where the editor obviously has the time to edit, but they are also part of the unit that are shooting, but not as editors, but they have a secondary role. So I'll talk about the secondary role, not as the editing role. They are responsible for the file management, or like a DIT, as another way to contribute to their education. So they begin to understand file management, and then they have their editing time afterwards. So that's how we see the role of the editor on the set, but not as a creative role. It's a management role. It's just to do with how we can put a group of students together and how many students we have. But I think it's important to learn that. You're talking about the creative, I'm talking about the management side of their files.
I'd just like to come back with something else, because I'm also afraid of kind of being influenced by the mood of something on set. I've been on sets on films when I first started editing, where I was on set for the actual shoot, and I know I've used shots in the edit that I probably shouldn't have done, just because everyone was in a really good mood when this image was shot, and that kind of infected me every time I saw that image, and I don't want to have that happen to me. But I would stress that I do like to be very closely involved in the process. I do always insist, if it's possible, and if the producers have enough money for that to happen, to actually start editing parallel to the shoot, so that I'm working on the footage that comes in every day. I'm discussing the stuff with the cinematographer, with the director, so there's always a feedback, there's always a good communication, and we're always talking about what's happening, and I am part of that process, and I think that's really important too.
That discussion in rushes is so important that it's happened while they're shooting. So,
Any further thoughts from our two cinematographers on editors being on set?
I think on commercials, editors on set are a good idea. On narrative films, not so much. For the same reason, not because I don't want them there, it's because for the same reason that Andrew said. I think that, everything I've ever shot, the editor starts on day one of the shoot, so they're editing parallel. So I think it'd be a distraction for them and for us to have the editor on set.
I can think of, the answer in short is depends on the job, depends on the director, obviously. There is one instance when having a editor, not necessarily on set, but obviously editing along more than any other projects when we shoot 3D. I've shot 3D quite a lot. And
Double the trouble.
Double the trouble. Well, depends where you're shooting it.
Yeah, of course.
But having an editor, because obviously you can you plan and storyboard as much as you can. Sometimes we even shoot some little test and animatics and whatever you want to call it, even for some features. But obviously, especially when you shoot on location or you shoot certain type of actors, or you shoot with some directors that like to improvise a bit, then there are certain things that, as you know, with 3D don't necessarily work very well from one cut to the other. And I have the greatest respect for every kind of obviously job on set, and even if I might have an opinion, I'd rather have a person that eventually actually has to do the job and say, okay, is this going to work for you? Or shall we cover it this way, or shall we shoot it with the different conversions and so on? Obviously, if you shoot 2D and then you convert 3D, that's a different ball game. But shooting native 3D, so with a 3D rig, especially with multiple cameras like I have, it is a good thing to have an editor, because as stereographers or as cinematographers, we think of one shot, sometimes a sequence, but at the end is the editor that has to make that series of shot work.
Yep.
And I think it's important if you use that.
Okay, so I think we are. There'll be plenty more to discuss, but I feel as though we ought to open it up to Q&As. Has someone got the microphone? And do we have any questions? Yes, Billy at the front.
Well, I'd like to thank the panel for expressing their varied experiences of working on digital or film. And I very much appreciate what Roger had to say. And those of us that were here this morning would have heard Dick Pope very eloquently express our relationship with the director and how we support the director. But what hasn't been raised is how we support the actors. Because if the actor's performance isn't there, what we've done is really lost. We need to be close to the actors as cinematographers to support them and to protect them. Now, working on film, there's a certain imperative for the actors to get it right. It's a little bit like going on stage. And obviously, you can only use one take. And so this question of letting the camera run in the hope that something will turn up troubles me. And Richard, Andrew, you are the one that perhaps have the most experience, since we don't have any actors on the panel. But are you aware that as the day progresses, the actors sort of run out of juice, run out of steam, and that the more takes and the more takes that the actors have had to produce is a draining effect? And I just raised the question of whether working on film, where there is still that discipline to get it right, makes a difference to the final outcome of the film, which is what matters.
I'm not sure that I've actually seen actors kind of start to lower their performance in the course of a long shooting day on digital, but I do think it's what Iain said before about about energy. I think it's a question of that. And I think the better prepared you are when you go on set, the clearer vision you have as a director of what kind of film you want to make and what you need to shoot to get that film, I think that would help everyone. And I think that kind of will help conserve energy on set and have that energy used at the right moments. And that's what helps the actors too. I don't think there's a lot to be gained from covering every angle with a master shot, like for every scene. It doesn't help the actors either.
Yeah, if I can chip in, the chimpanzees and Shakespeare thing just doesn't work, you know. But it does. It's very much the shape, size, and color of the filmmaker, how they approach. I mean, Anthony Minghella, God rest him, you know, was very much centered on, well, initially on script, but during the shooting process, very much on the actors and the performances, and that was all his energy went around that, and we made the film as he went through. With Fury Road, God bless him, Tom Hardy at Cannes at the press conference, in front of the world's press, apologized to George, and George said, "Well, why? Why are you apologizing?" And he said, "Because I didn't know what you were doing until I saw the finished film." And I kind of, when he said that, I thought, you know, that is absolutely true. He was constantly flummoxed by not having purchased on the totality of the thing. That George wanted him in the moment. And so as a filmmaker, he was using a kind of perversity, if you like, with the actors to get what he wanted, and it worked. And both Tom and Charlize and Nicholas Hoult, they all celebrated that, because they were in the hands of someone who knew how to use them. So I think there's very different ways of... But the idea that you run on and do 18 takes, I mean, if you're doing 18 takes, there's something far wrong, as you well know. I mean, you don't need to do that.
Do we have any further questions?
Hello, I'm Tony Pierce-Roberts. On my latest film, I do take your point, Andrew, about losing lots of good material because of the sheer volume of work. I mean, we shot it with the Alexa. We had, on average, 3.5 hours of dailies every day. And I worked it out at the end of the film that had we shot it on film, we'd have been shooting in excess of 50 to 1. Which was, I think, extraordinary. And that lack of discipline went right through even to the grade. I mean, I would be grading a shot for 20 minutes or so, special effects shot. I might have a query. I'd ring the editing department, and they'd say, "Oh, what version are you grading?" I'd say, "Well, this says 276 version." They say, "Oh, no, you should be on 293. So we were grading stuff that was never going to be in the film. And I have to say, at no time did anyone on production ever say anything about it. Nobody put their hand up. The only time was, well, if only the camera department could work quicker, we could have more film that we'd shoot. So it permeates everything. And I think one of the reasons that there was more discipline with film is it was a slightly different era where people generally were more disciplined in their general life. People didn't stand in front of the camera. I've had people making mobile phone calls in front of the camera when I've been in with the DIT trying to light the set because they think, oh, nothing's happening. The operator's standing there. It's not a problem. And I think that's part of the problem. There's a general lack of discipline in people's lives, which translates into, it's exaggerated by the film. Sorry, it's just my experience, it's not a question.
Yeah, I think that starts right at the very beginning, that problem, right from the script. I mean, I don't know why, but I can tell when I'm reading a script for the first time, within 2 or 3 pages, I can tell whether the writer really knows where they're headed with the story. I don't know why I know that, you just can tell it, that they know where this is going to finish. And that process, same with filmmakers. I've worked with some A-list filmmakers, and they all have one characteristic in common. They know what they want, and they know that they've got to fight to get it. And if that is imbued from the get-go, then everybody has an economy of purpose. And there's always a bit of wastage, but it's much less than when a filmmaker is standing there going, you know. I've had that too.
I think if I can chip in just to one quick thing. I was reading once that things like Facebook and so on, all these digital media have taken away sort of personal contact between people. I noticed that, coming obviously from a film background, it's the same as happening in digital, and that is exactly the problem. I think there is a lack of communication. Somebody's doing... I once found a DIT that was showing the rushes to people, and I didn't even see them. And obviously, that didn't go down too well with me. And I think the secret for good filmmaking is to keep communication open, and everybody should know what's happening. In the past, obviously you would talk to the lab and everybody knew what was going on. Now it's departmented, and when people ask me, do you prefer to do big pictures or sort of lower budget thing? And I said, any budget, if there is communication, going on, because otherwise, it's just going to turn into disaster.
Totally right.
Do we have any further? Oh, we have one hand at the back.
Hello, thank you.
Hello.
Yeah, what I was finding in what it is in terms of your opinion on the digital and its effect on filmmaking, because what I tend to see amongst a lot of films is a lack of singular vision, and I think that might be due to the fact that because you are able to shoot so much on digital and shoot so much coverage, that the films can be cut in so many different ways that most movies end up looking the same, whereas in the old, previously when you were shot on celluloid, if you had an idea, you had to pretty much stick with it. And do you feel that digital is having a compromising effect on the ingenuity of new filmmakers now?
Yeah, I do. I think there's definitely a problem with that. If I could just tell a quick anecdote. I was privileged enough to see John Ford when he came to the National Film Theatre in the early 70s, and he sat up there and somebody asked him a question from the audience, which was to do with a particular tracking shot in one of his movies, and it went on like one of the clever question, and he studied this guy for a bit, and then he looked at the critic who was interviewing him, and then he looked back and he said, well, if I remember right, we didn't have a dolly could go any faster. And that is actually fundamentally where you come from. Is that, of course, he was a filmmaker telling a story, but he didn't want this intellectualizing of possibilities. He wanted to say, this was a story that I told in the way I told it, and that's what I did. And then I moved on. He was famous because he walked away from all his editors. He would leave them to cut the movie and go on and shoot something else. So I think nowadays, and particularly I think in the film school environment, and I've been through it, there's this sense of everyone wanting to do it every which way, simply because they haven't got the mental discipline yet to understand. It's rather like the old Michelangelo and the marble. You have to get rid of the stuff you don't need. Get rid of the stuff you don't need. Get down to the essence of it. I have a friend who's a writer in New York, and he uses his apartment when he's writing a screenplay. He starts out with a newspaper cutting, he puts it on the wall, and scribbles a thing. He doesn't write scene one day interior. He will spend anything up to a couple of months going through his apartment, putting things in different walls in different rooms, each room representing a different part of the story. And the reason he does that is he wants to remain flexible and open, but disciplined in the sense that he's trying to find out where he ends up, if you follow me. So his bedroom is the last act of the film. And once he's got that, then he can work back to the point where he can sit down and start to write the movie. So if you take that approach, that disciplined approach, amateurs work from the front, professionals work from the back, then that helps us all to understand why we're there. You guys have all been some great filmmakers here. You all know that. At the end of the day, you don't close yourself off, but you know the purpose of what you have to try and achieve. And you remain focused, disciplined, organized right up to the hilt, and creatively flexible at the same time. That's a very difficult thing to explain to people who don't actually make films.
Here. Do we have any? Oh, I think we're out of time. We're out of time. Okay. Well, thank you very much indeed to my panelists. It's been absolutely fantastic. Harriet, Ben, Franz, Iain, Andrew. Thank you very much indeed. I think Nigel wanted to have one last word.
I just wanted to say thank you to this incredible panel. Be very for the fantastic honesty which they've answered the whole situation. I'm very grateful. But I also want to thank very much Ronnie Prince here for putting his heart into this discussion. and moderating it so well. Thank you, Ronnie.
Can I just have one last final word? Hello, can you hear me out there? Which was Nigel made me remember a really interesting phrase, which is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 P's rule, which is proper preparation prevents piss poor performance. So next time you're next time you're shooting or doing anything, try and remember the 6 P's rule. Anyway, we're going to have a little visual treat next.
Oh yes, we're going to see a trailer. Just at the end of it, you can all walk home, or see the show. It's worth seeing.
My world is fire and blood.
Everything is dependent on oil.
We are killing for gasoline.
The world is almost out of water. Water. Now there's the water wars.
Here they come again. Everybody's gone out of their mind. You're not the only one, Max.
Out here, everything hurts. You want to get through this? Do as I say. Now pick up what you can and run.
Oh, what a day! What a lovely day!